I think it is essential that people care for themselves and others in whatever way that they need to. We cannot relinquish our joy, which feels insane. I know when I ask people how you're doing, and people immediately sort of clench up, and there's a feeling like you're not allowed to say you're doing okay, even if it is the truth. And we have to reject that outright. We have to be okay. We have to find a way to be okay, even with this hellstorm coming in around us.
Right.
It's essential. Otherwise, they're winning on the very basis of it. They think it's okay just to be positive and have a positive, hopeful, optimistic outlook. Somebody recently called me Lovely Lou about something and like kind of being delusional about the outlook. And I don't think I can forecast destruction or like that this is over and then also show up every day and give my best self to it.
Absolutely.
We have to be hopeful at the end of it.
Hi, Mayor Byers. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me out today.
Thank you so much for coming on She Comes with Baggage. We have a lot of really important topics to talk about. And also, I'm just really excited to get to know you on a deeper level. I know we met briefly at an event recently in West Hollywood. And it was just so nice to hear even just like the very minimal chance that I could of your story. And I was just immediately drawn to you. And I was like, I want to learn so much more about you. So like, what better way to do that than to come on and talk to each other for like an hour?
Yeah, it's great. It's a good, you'll get to know a lot.
Exactly. So the people who are tuning in, you're the mayor of West Hollywood. And congratulations. That's absolutely huge. Not only just in the fact that you're young, you're also a woman. And you're just like defeating all the different odds against when it comes to people thinking about politics. Yeah. And I also want to be able to share today about how relatable that is and how people can get involved in politics and it doesn't have to be this big, bad, scary thing. Right. Well, where are you from? Are you from West Hollywood originally?
No, I grew up in Arizona, actually, Mesa, Arizona. Okay. I always say the beige, sort of uninspired landscape around me is what really motivated my thinking about the bigger world. Okay. I loved being, in Arizona. The desert has a lot to offer. I love the like rough and tumble of the outdoors. And I mean, Arizona is just such a beautiful state itself, but I definitely had a craving to be a part of something that felt bigger than the community I grew up in.
Okay, amazing. And what about your family? Do you have siblings or are you close with your family?
Yeah, I'm close with my family. I have a younger brother. He's 17 months younger than me, so we grew up really close. We sort of like could trick people that we were twins, even though we're very different people, which I love very much. He works with my dad. My dad's worked in construction my whole life. He sort of, in high school started working on job sites doing tile, and he's brilliant artist who lays tile in people's homes. My brother followed that path. Okay, amazing. And whenever you kind of look back at your early childhood days, was there ever an indication that you would go into public service, or did you, run for student office when you were in high school or anything, or was this completely off the path? I'm nodding my head because yes to all of the above.
All the above.
I was like the kitchen helper from early on. I worried about everything. I wanted to make sure everything was taken care of. And I just always wanted to help other people. And so as soon as I could, I started volunteering for a lot of different activities. I mean, my mom would have to drive me all over the giant valley that is Phoenix to get to different volunteer things. So it was like this idea of helping people, of wanting to take care of things, of being really worried or concerned about things and not knowing who else was taking care of those things. So I was really motivated in that way. And school provided a lot of opportunities for sort of leadership development early on. I ran for student council in high school, all the different things. I really loved all of that.
It sounds like from a very early age that community and public works has been a part of your core. You're like your why.
Absolutely.
Would you say that is kind of like your driving factor in life?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I grew up in that, it takes a village to raise a kid sort of idea. Yeah. My mom and dad both had a big community of people that were always around us. So community was something that was really tangible and felt growing up. We would drive down to Tucson and spend these holidays surrounded by so many different people, and it just felt like fun in such a huge way. It was so important to me, and I wanted to be a part of that big environment where people came together and great things could happen at any time.
That's amazing. I love that too, that your family was also part of like, you want to go to this volunteer activity, let me drive you there. Like, you want to run for student office, let me do it.
Supportive.
It sounds very supportive. And I would love to hear also about your early indicators of your queerness. Was that something that you had recognized early on? And did you feel the same level of support with that as well?
Sure. Yeah, I definitely felt it early. I, watched Now and Then and Christina Ricci and Devon Sawa, like Casper even, like all these sort of moments where it's like, who am I watching this for was really, confusing to me as a kid.
Okay.
And I don't think I really leaned into that part of my identity beyond the feelings that I held close. But there were moments in high school, especially these sort of instigating moments where I found my voice around the subject differently. The story I tell is there was a teacher who showed up in our Spanish class and said that if you're gay, you'll amount to nothing in life. And she could say that because she had a nephew or something like that, And so just sort of felt that burning like scream inside of me, and went home that night and screamed onto a T-shirt a giant statement that I got a few of my other friends to wear. And we showed up in class the next day and made that statement. Like, love them for who they are, not for who they love. But I remember it being a them, not us, not me. But I was definitely trying to protect that part of me, I think, even then. And I certainly had friends and community around me that were starting to say their truth. And that this was such, an affront to that ability for people to feel safe and seen and supported was not something I could stand for. I didn't graduate with my Spanish credits. To cut to the end of that story.
Very combative with that.
Yeah,
you're like, matter of fact, I'm switching my language as well.
Didn't finish that class, but really found my voice in a different way.
That's amazing. And it also sounds like it kind of like slingshotted you even further into advocacy as well. And I know you had just mentioned too that you didn't know that you were necessarily fighting for yourself yet, or did you kind of feel that it was a personal attack, but you were more of like in a reflective way or deflective way where it was like, I'm protecting other people, but I don't know if I'm ready to say it's for me as well?
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it's definitely like I felt this was protecting other people, the people who directly came to me, out of safety and because they wanted to tell me that this was something that they're coming out. It's a big deal to hear that from your friends at that age.
Absolutely.
And I didn't say it back. It wasn't something I also had to reveal, but I was saying, standing up for them in a really clear way. And I think by that, this is for my community. This is for me in a way, this defense and of people in this way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what we're talking about as we'll jump into further is like when we're talking about the queer community and talking about queer rights, right? It's also interconnected with everything.
Totally.
You don't have to be queer to also be benefiting from queer people having rights.
That's right.
Because I do think that they are so interconnected where it's like if one person's rights are so easily able to be removed, then you have to question what other rights are easily able to take away.
Right.
And so I do think that that's so interesting and fascinating that you were able to recognize that so early on, even if you weren't ready, to necessarily say that was for you. You were like, but this is for everyone else, regardless. And I think that's really amazing. And it's also really cool that you were like, I'm getting everyone involved. I'm organizing. I'm organizing T-shirts. I'm making them myself. And you went through. Did the teacher see them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. We showed up in class. We sat there. It was like, get out. It was a whole moment that happened.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was my big first act of disruption, of sort of like bucking the status quo, of standing up in the face of something that felt really difficult, but to me felt obvious. Like, this is the only thing I can do. I can't go back to that class and not, cause a big fuss about what just happened. It was sort of crazy to me. And again, I think there were people who were in that Spanish class who later came out to me, but before maybe hadn't done that. But it was just this sense of like, what is happening and why does she feel so comfortable saying this? We shouldn't allow that to happen.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, especially as young adults, and we're being taught as understandably so that you should respect your elders, right? I do, that was been ingrained. I'm from Tennessee. So where I grew up, it was very much respect your elders, but I also felt at certain times that sometimes the elders wouldn't respect the youth. And I do think that it's got to be a version of where respect has to go both ways. Or else, then who's actually getting their peace protected at that point? Right. Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
And, there's a lot of talk around, well, they come from a different generation. And I'm like, I do understand that. And I carry empathy. But at a certain point, there has to be a mutual respect where we can learn from one another instead of just absolutely invalidating someone's identity and existence. And so I think that's really cool. I feel like if I was in your class, I'd be like, where's my t-shirt? I want one. I want a t-shirt. Like, let's go. Let's rally.
And I think for so many people, that was probably the case, right? And it just takes time for people to find that voice. But now, all this time later, the school I went to was very religious. Even though it was a public school, the majority of people who went there shared religion as part of their experience. It was part of my early, othering feelings and just, I don't fit into that community. That's not for me. But we're all community here. We all go to the school. We're all a part of this mascot. So that it was just fighting for the thing that made sense to me, that this is community. They have a right to be here. And how dare you deny their existence in that way?
Period. I love that. Absolutely. I want to ask you also, because in a world that often overlooks bisexuality. How did you start to not only feel more validated in your own visibility and feeling more like you could step into your own identity, and then also allowing other people to validate that identity as well?
Yeah, it's been such a struggle, especially in having a very public role now. I have a male partner who I've been with for a very long time, and so it's easy for people to assume that I am just a straight woman. It is easy for people to deny that or to ask, like, how much does that even really matter about her perspective and experience? And therefore, it becomes easy for myself to deny it too. And that part of it is the saddest thing, I think, where it's like it just becomes so easy to forget a part of my identity because it's not like activated in some sort of specific way. But it's always activated. It's who I am. That's how I see things. That's the worldview I have. And it's very much informed my politics and the way I navigate this. So to deny it is to deny a piece of myself that is, in fact, very active at all times.
Absolutely. And while you were going through your own self-discovery, is that something that you had to almost question yourself so many times just because other people have pressured you to question yourself? Or did you carry any internalized homophobia or internalized shame in any way?
Yeah, I think it wasn't as much homophobia. To me, it was sort of like, well, what's the point? Like, I'm in a committed relationship. I am in a public space. Does it matter? And for me, it was about owning my truth and owning my full identity. And it did matter, in fact, in many ways. You know, when you're running as a candidate for office, especially in a place like West Hollywood, the questions are going to come to you.
Absolutely.
And to be in sort of a, wishy-washy, like, there's nothing wishy-washy about my identity.
Absolutely.
There may be not a history tract about how I've communicated that, especially since I've moved from one city to another and done that many times. But like my dating history, my relationship history, people who I've been intimate with, all of that isn't part of a public realm of knowledge.
Of course.
But my identity and how I communicate it can be. And so it felt like I needed to take ownership of this and in a significant way, especially in order to be my authentic self in this role, but to do what I think we're supposed to do in leadership, which is create more space for others. And so as complicated and as, not, I don't know, easy as it feels to be owning this in the complex ways, that's everybody's journey.
Absolutely.
It's like, figure it out, girl, own it.
Right. And so since you started reclaiming that, has that been almost like a liberating feeling for you where you can feel like you can actually step into your space and create the policy that you're looking for and create the community and the safe spaces that you've always wanted and advocated for others, but now you actually can feel safe in those spaces as well?
Truly. Yeah, absolutely. It feels like just being my full self in so many ways, and recognizing that there are so many people who it will take time for them to be able to step into it and do that. It gives me a lot of humility for what other people may be going through, and just recognition that these are journeys in so many ways for people. And so, our friend PJ, who runs Baby Gay and creates space for people to have that later in life coming out story, it's so essential because there could be so many reasons why it hasn't been the story people arrive on just yet for themselves. It doesn't mean it's not coming, though.
I agree. Well, if someone was listening in and they're already feeling inspired and maybe they are wanting to step more into themselves and feel, find that reclamation for themselves, what is maybe a piece of advice that you would give to them?
Yeah, I think about the friend I was with when I really felt comfortable saying it, and the role that friend has played in my life, and like the challenges that we've gone through, and just, we were like walking around the Grove or something. It was so funny, just like that this is the setting that I'm going to say this in, and how special it felt to have that moment. And so for me, it's like find that person that makes you feel like your best, most authentic self. And like confide in them, build that trusting space. And then from there, you can game plan. Like, how do I actually do this everywhere else? It becomes like that real confidant in your life. That's an important role to have.
I think that's what is so really great to talk about, too, because we talk a lot about finding your community. And sometimes I think that we put this big meaning and this big definition behind the word community. And then that in itself can sometimes feel very isolated because you're like, where is my community? How do I find it? It feels so scary to find it. But sometimes community can just mean one person. Or, finding community can just be that one hobby or that one person or that one thing that makes you feel more of like yourself, right? Like, finding community doesn't have to be finding 4,000 people that are surrounding you, because sometimes in places like in places that aren't Los Angeles, that are in more of like rural parts of, the U.S., there might not be dozens and dozens of people who look just like you and have a similar mindset. So it's like finding even that one person, like you said, to create that safe space with is so important. And then who knows, maybe they have a friend.
That's
and then they have a friend who has a friend. And the next thing you know, you do have a larger community behind that. And do you feel, that maybe that is also a part of your journey and why you've been so passionate about creating safe spaces for others, because sometimes you didn't feel like you had community or safe spaces for yourself?
100%.
Yeah.
I felt like you just gave me the therapy talk I've needed my whole life. But no, you're completely onto it. I've had incredible friends throughout my life. I don't have like a continuity of friends that I've been with my whole life.
Yeah.
And so I think I have felt a lacking of like what that looks like, what it looks like to have those people who are there for you your whole life.
Yeah.
And that's not because I've been without, but because it's typically defined as looking a certain way.
Yeah.
So it's been really important for me to figure out what that means to me in the most authentic way and how I've really built that. And you talk about like people or, hobbies being a draw for that. I really found places being another, entity in that way. Like whether it's the restaurant or the bar or like the city or the space, there's so much that people are showing up in a place because they feel that safety, that comfort, that familiarity. And you can find your people that way too. And as somebody who's traveled a lot and who's lived in a lot of different places, like it's, to me, almost felt like I'm giving myself less of a chance at building that community, but instead I've found a whole different community operating in that way. So it's been very strange, but I very much appreciate that reflection.
Of course. Well, also, you just reminded me of my own reflection too, because it's like I've lived in so many different places. I say that I've ping-ponged through life. So I started in Tennessee, moved to San Francisco, then traveled, ended up in Sydney, New York.
Wow.
I've been ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
And so every single place that I've been, I've have like one best friend that I've met. And so some people are like, how many best friends do you have? I was like, you mind yourself. But also, I'm like, it's because everywhere I go, I create my own little version of a community in each place. And as you mentioned, it's like there's not this continuity of like that we've been together for my whole life, but it's like you've been a part of my community and my safe space for that chapter.
Yes.
And that can continue in itself too,
That's
right? And so I think that that's really special that community and chosen family can look so different based on every single person. There's nuances to even that, which I also think is really cool with our community is we're just constantly challenging the status quo of everything, creating and uncreating traditions and social norms and gender norms and everything. It's like, no, because what really just feels right, what feels good. And it's like, how do you navigate that with everything?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think that's kind of like the exciting part of being a part of this community on a larger scale is just like really being able to be curious about yourself and finding love through that each part of the way,
I think about like if every single moment's a new act of self-discovery, then there's going to be a different thing that you will find in that moment, in that chapter. And that's happening a lot more frequently, I think, for some folks in the queer community. And probably part of why we feel like there's a lot of people and a lot of different chapters of our life. But it makes sense in some ways too.
Well, even in that, like I came out like 13 years ago, which feels like a whole different lifetime in itself. But even since then, the queer community has evolved so much, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times you hear people saying, the alphabet community, but almost in like a negative or derogatory term. But to me, I see it as like, I'm so grateful that our community is forever expansive instead of, diminishing
finding a way
people.
To limit itself,
Exactly. I'm like, I would prefer to be a part of a community that always grows and continues to feel more expansive and more inclusive of people than the other way around, you know, where I'm like, it doesn't have to be a negative thing. If anything, I'm like, please, it's a great thing that every single person is finding words that make them feel more valid. Do you know what I mean?
I totally understand.
That's exciting.
That's very exciting. Yeah.
I would love to chat with you about your journey into politics and policy. So you've now combated with the Spanish teachers. You've now, rallied your community around you, your student body. Yeah. Where was it that you were like, I think that I can make a difference? And how did you end up in West Hollywood and start your career in public service?
Yeah, it's a very long story, but for me, that like initial scream of trying to find my voice and hearing it resonate and feeling impact from it and making a real choice of what I was going to do, I needed to follow that. So I tried to find of the big community that I wanted to be in, I left my high school in Mesa, Arizona. I applied to one school. It was in Lugano, Switzerland, and I went.
Wow.
And I remember telling people, like, I'm going to school in Switzerland next year. I really wanted to be a part of that bigger world. The funny thing is that bigger world in Switzerland, where I, lived for a year, and it was an amazing experience traveling to so many different places and being a part of this international relations program and getting to experience different like political viewpoints from abroad. But the school is really small. There's only 400 kids there compared to like my 2,800 person high school. So that feeling of community felt limited again in a different way. I got to be a part of the global community, but the actual people who I was like going through life with and having that college experience with was very narrow and incredible people who I'm still great friends with today, but it just wasn't a pool of people that kept growing and expanding like I was used to. So I ended up transferring back to Arizona, where I found a lot of this, think global, act local sort of mentality really took hold for me.
That makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, and I really wanted to place roots and like connect to a place and have some of that continuity. I think I was starting to feel like I was lacking and missing out on. So I got involved in a lot more tangible issue work at that time. I started working with the Arizona Students Association on education issues in Arizona, where we were devastated by the impacts of underfunding public education, and finding the real like tangible tactics that helped me professionalize some of my interests and hobbies as they were as advocacy, and really turn them into a career pipeline. So it was looking for those internship opportunities. I lived in San Francisco and worked with a really amazing women's peace organization that helped me stretch what advocacy looked like. No longer was I just making phone calls and grassroots organizing on my college campus, but I was, standing up in places of power and helping really shift the ways that we were thinking around, life-affirming resources and investment versus investment in the war economy. And just really stretch this from, being pro-education to being anti-war and what it all looked like all across the board. It helped me start thinking in more powerful ways. I think about where governments are responsible for taking care of people, where our resources go. And so I think it was in that timeline I knew at some point I would likely be running for office, although the caveat is when I was in second grade, I told my mom I was going to run for president because that was the way you help the most people, of course. So I think, it's sort of
you always knew.
I always knew. You had a feeling. I always knew that government was supposed to help people. And if that's what I really cared about, then there was a way to do that in government. And I think part of the shock and the scream I talk about is seeing those powerful places and people not actually serve people's needs and be so startled and scared and then angry that wasn't what was really happening.
And I think there's so many points that you made there where I was just like, yes, because I think we're seeing a huge shift nationally right now where, to preface, I'm from Tennessee, and again, some of the things that people would tell me constantly is that, if you're around people, never talk about money, religion, or politics. Don't ever bring up any of those things. And then the older I get, the more I realize that all three of those things are very political, right? Like they're very ingrained in politics, whether we want to admit it or not. And by not talking and addressing and being communicative in the way that we think about policy and the way that we think about community, is also not really helping us as individuals either, or also just creating a deeper relationship. Because I also feel like politics, in a way, are also a reflection of who you are as a person and what you stand for. And so I think it's very interesting now as I'm, moving through my own life and my own career pipeline of like being like, it's interesting why that was always the thing where don't talk about these three things, because it's almost like if you do, then you'll find your voice and then you'll fight for something bigger. And I think that is what we're collectively seeing right now is people are like, no, I'm going to talk about it. And I'm going to own what I believe in. And it's like, it's an interesting shift because I remember asking my friend recently, I'm like, did everyone talk about politics when we were growing up? Because it didn't feel like that. But now it's like very much involved in everything and everywhere. And there are obviously pros and cons to that. But I do think it's just so vastly important that people are paying attention right now. And I also think that it's tapping into what you just said about recognizing that governments are meant to be helping people and recognizing when it's not. And how can we be angry productively, right? And be angry and like channel that anger into a conduit of helping others. And so I feel like, it's just amazing what you're mentioning because I think that we're all collectively feeling that right now. And we're like, but how do we find that tangibility to actionable steps. And so there's so many things I want to ask you all at once, but is that something that you ever felt growing up where you felt like you had to almost edit the way that you talked with people, or were you just always just straight up like, I'm going to own it and I'm just going to stand up for what I believe in?
Yeah, I think it's a both. I think there was a moment where I stopped editing for sure and I let it fly. I think when I recognized that so many people lived in that bubble, that like privileged space of we're not going to talk about religion, money, or politics. And I realized that my interest in talking about it was coming from a place of not fitting inside the assumption that my family was well off, that I was part of the dominant religion or any religion at all, that politics didn't impact my life. When I started to have consciousness that all of those things were not true and, my family's struggle financially and my lack of belonging to a religion and that feeling of isolation, and then, the way that I understood politics deeply impacting me. I was a kid with a dad in construction. We didn't grow up with healthcare. I was making very different choices about how I thought about, going snowboarding on the weekends with friends on a mountain trip. Like I didn't feel like the immediacy of being able to participate in things because of the limitations. I had a really bad medical incident happen to me where I was in the hospital during high school without knowing what was going to happen, or just after high school and college, and remembering my parents struggle in the hallway, just trying to figure out how we're going to deal with this instead of being at my bedside. These things were like, I'm not going to let my voice sit in isolation anymore. And if it just makes you uncomfortable to talk about these things, well, I'm sorry, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, right.
And it's not something that I feel like anyone should be alone in that discomfort. There's a pathway out of this. There are ways that we can change this, and we should be doing that together.
And it also makes you wonder if the uncomfortability is almost conditioned, right?
Totally.
Because, if, for example, one of my closest family members were always very much like, I don't care about politics. I don't care. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to talk about it. And I was always very much like, I'm going to talk about it. Like it's very much a part of my everyday life. And now I'm seeing them be even almost a bigger advocate than me. And I'm like, oh, she did it, and it's just really exciting to see that, because again, it's almost so conditioned that we're supposed to feel uncomfortable around talking about very real problems, right? We shouldn't feel uncomfortable about the realities that people are having trouble paying for medical bills, right? Or putting food on the table, or having human rights and human dignity. Like those conversations shouldn't make us feel uncomfortable, but the reality that people are facing those challenges should make us feel uncomfortable. And so that's where I'm like, how can we revisit that conversation and create, I don't know, unity and sense of fighting for better. We are seeing right now that there is a lot of division, right? Especially after the recent election. Why do you think that this particularly is a time where there's so much division? And then also, how are ways that we can bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think about this a lot. As somebody who was probably and knows I was very divisive early in my politics, it was a choice, right? I wanted people to feel that force of something different in their face. And so I didn't care if I was being a bridge builder and how I communicated. I wanted people to know that there was a different opposing viewpoint and they needed to deal with it. I think that newness and that way of being very fresh into the space was very self-empowering. And over time, I recognized that it wasn't effective at actually changing hearts and minds, which is what we have to do. We're in a democracy. We're, empowered to have a differing sense of opinions. But the process by which we govern is that we bring people together, we find consensus, and we move forward. And so when I recognized that part of what I was doing was not helping build that consensus, not being a part of a process that allowed people to change within themselves, but really just wanted to confront people's differences, confrontational politics can be just that, confronting, and help erupt something new in people, but it doesn't often help coach them into the change that we need. And it's really, I think for so many people who are new, they may realize this at some point themselves, that there may be a different style of politics, a different way of relating to each other across our differences that they'll find more comfort in. They may not. And some people will always be a part of a more disruptive engine that helps also, stretch the window of what's possible in our politics. It's really what you find is most effective to you to keep engaged. And that's what I say to everyone. But I think that's part of what we're seeing is just so many new people who are feeling that self-empowerment in a voice they have long dismissed or denied or have been, ignoring inside of them. I think that discomfort that we're feeling collectively is so much greater because things are pretty bad for a lot of people. And whether you feel it yourself or you're just shouting because, it matters to somebody you care about deeply, we're all really feeling it in a big way. And I think that newness to the experience is a lot of what we're seeing. And people will find a way to come together because that's what this democracy is meant to.
Absolutely. Well, I know that this doesn't sound like it should have this heavy of a metaphor, but to me, I grew up in hospitality. I worked in hospitality for multiple years, over 10 years. And a lot of times you always hear the customer is right, right? But a lot of times, sometimes like the customer is also bringing up complaints because more so they just really want to be heard. They want their voice to be heard. They want their concerns to be heard. Not necessarily that they're always looking for an immediate solution, but they just want you to understand where they're coming from. And I do think that I personally look back on that often because I'm thinking about it from, I immediately get very angered when I do see other sides of opinions, like with my family being in the South and holding very different opinions than me. But then I try to get down to like where on what level of this is like, where is this truly coming from? What are you most scared of? Is it safety? Is it your fear of not being able to pay for things? Is it my dad being in his late 60s and not being able to retire anytime soon? Right. These are all very real things that we're all feeling across the board. It's just that like now certain people have been taught that certain politics are going to actually help them, right? But ultimately, we're all worried about the same things. Right. It's worried about how we're going to survive and continue to help our families and put food on the table and then live our lives to the fullest, right? Ultimately, as human beings, that's what we want. So I always try to remember that because I'm also battling do I cut people off or do I not? And it's very difficult to figure out at what point am I protecting my peace versus helping the bigger picture. Wow. Is that something that you have had to deal with even in your personal life? And then also, how would you navigate that for somebody listening in and feeling like, do I cut people off or do I use this as a learning tool?
Yeah, I think what you're saying about protecting your peace is, you have to put your air mask on first before you can help others. You have to be able to take care of yourself. I talk about what it means to find your place of sustainability always. And I think that's an ever-changing reality for people. But I don't ever knock people for doing what they need to do to take care of themselves. And I do appreciate what you're also saying about seeing the bigger picture here. Because I think the way we relate to each other is what this all comes back down to. And I think if people are making a choice to cut people off, like the idea that we're really trying to protect under this democracy is that all people do have, contributions to make and their voices do matter. And we do want people to move forward together in a way that creates a shared sense of safety and harmony and still be able to support differing opinions without undermining each other's existence in very many ways. Yeah, it's gotten to such a point of an extreme right now that we're really feels like we're making do or die choices.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes down to our personal relationships. So I think it's a really individual choice for so many people.
Absolutely.
But I think the work to recognize that this really is all about how we relate to one another is something we always have to be working on. And that means maybe now is not the time, but maybe there is a place and I hope we can get there.
I fully agree. And that's something that I'm also learning through, even just doing this podcast is there's so many people that I've been interviewing and had the pleasure of talking to that come from very different walks of life. Yeah. But every single person has something that I feel related to. And it just always brings me back to realizing that we're all more alike than we are different.
Totally.
And that even means the people who have very different mindsets than you when it comes to certain things in life. Unfortunately, sometimes, it's not even unfortunate. Like, sometimes you have to actually think about it and be like, there are certain things that we have in common. And that works in the other way around. Like, sometimes we fear what we don't understand. And therefore, we fear, people of different backgrounds. We fear people of different religions or different classes, And so I think that whenever we can actually break it down and get on a human level and realize that we actually do have things that are more in common between us than different, then I do think that that's how we're going to collectively move forward.
I really think about it from the place of being an elected official now, too, which is not the experience everyone is having.
Absolutely.
But in my role, I have to sit and there's a public comment period at the start of every meeting and another one for every specific item on the agenda. And it is my role to hear from everyone, no matter what they say, no matter what their assumption of me and my leadership is. It is truly to hear from everyone. And that is a function of the democracy that we sit in.
Yes.
As part of that democracy in this process, I have trust and faith that the majority of people who show up and speak are going to move us in a direction that is supportive of all of us.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to sit in a space of fear or anxiety thinking that what's going to happen is going to undermine or be detrimental. Now, maybe on some individual basis, but overall, I do have confidence that we're moving forward in a way that is of everyone.
That's great. Yeah.
And I think that helps me say the things that about, this is about how we relate to each other. At the end of the day, if you're one less person that has a positive experience because you've removed your relationship from someone's life, that could actually turn them into a different direction. So I think there's something that we should own the responsibility of trying to find a way to continue to relate to people across differences and trust that this big process that we are meant to engage in will continue to build a community that's for all of us.
I love that. I love that. And it also just reminds me that, there's so much at stake in the sense of even our individual mental health, right? And that is something I think that we're going to continuously see a pattern in, is just making sure that we don't fall into a state of burnout. Because I think at this moment, I think that's something that we're all starting to get to a point of like, oh, are we feeling burnt out? And I'm like, baby girl, we got a long way to go. Like, you know what I'm
11 months
saying?
into this round 2.
Right, absolutely. So I would love to hear, how are you, as an elected official, but also on a personal level, how are you protecting your mental peace at this time? And also, what are some things that you do to stay optimistic right now?
Yeah, I think part of it's taking on what I can and what I'm meant to in this moment. I try not to overcomplicate my existence with things that I am not going to be impactful or make a difference in. And some of that looks like, the concerns of individual relationships or bigger issues that my city or my role can't really affect. It's really knowing what my lane is and knowing what I'm here and meant to do in this moment. Finding that purpose, I think, is essential. And then part of it's, touching grass, right? Get outside every day, drink water, take care of my health at the most fundamental levels, because no one will do that for me. And so much of being a part of this is going to be a challenge. I'm not here because there isn't a struggle. I'm here because there is a struggle, and I'm meant to be a part of it. And in order to do that to my best self, I have to be my best self. And I think that's the part we take for granted. We want to give, go, go, go. I know I was that activist that was willing to sleep under office desks and get little to no sleep and have zero food or even think about nutritional value. It was just, what can I give in this moment now because it needs me? But at the end of that day, you're getting ground up into the gears and you're not actually like changing the way the system moves. And it was so important to me to find that place of effectiveness. And it looks different for everyone, but you have to find what that looks like for you.
Fully agree. I mean, I've been in this space of LGBTQ activism for about 5 or 6 years now. And I was on the grind. I mean, last year I was on the road 10 months of the year, which was, now that I look back at it, I'm like, that was a little excessive. You know what I mean? But I loved it. I absolutely, like, that's the hard part, is like, they always say, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm like, that is not true, first off, because the more I love what I do, the more I want to do it, right? And I feel so absolutely enamored with what I do and helping people and trying to make a difference in the world. But at the same time, I realized that I was literally putting myself into the ground with how much I was working, to the point where I was now feeling self-isolated or feeling like my mental health was taking a toll. And then, of course, with the way that politically the world was changing last year, I recognized that this was going to be an incredibly difficult time that we're stepping into. And I had a burnout last year. I had a very hard crash out because I was just like, I felt defeated. I felt hopeless because in a lot of ways I was also working on the campaign trail for the presidency. And I was like, I really expected a different result. So I think for me, it was like, after I experienced that burnout, I realized, okay, let me take a minute. Let me give myself grace in this moment, because it's okay to feel like a sense of mourning. But then it was like, what feels more tangible moving forward? Because it's obviously not going to be running myself into the ground. It's going to be pivoting and finding ways that I can still stay active and while also stay in touch with my joy. And I think that's also like why this podcast came about, because it was also like, this feels like grounding. It feels like therapeutic. Actually, this is my level of therapy at the end of the day. So thank you for coming on. But yeah, I think it's also just like, it's okay to pivot your level of advocacy as well.
Totally.
Because it doesn't have to stay, like, once you start on one level, it's like you don't have to like continue, because then it's also burning out. And we also just need everybody together right now, which is...
Evolution, I think, is the goal, right? We should keep growing. We should keep being able to stretch ourselves in different ways, and doesn't mean showing up the same way. I think I reflect on the way that activism sort of feels like there's generational struggles, but I really think about it as people always finding their right alignment for whatever moment they're in. And that's what the call is, because we want people to show up in their best way. And again, that'll continue to look different for everyone, but it's that you show up in a way that is true and right for you.
Isn't there that quote that says, if you don't stand up for something, you'll fall for anything?
Yes.
And I love that quote. It's very much what I'm feeling right now, where it's like, stand up for something. You don't have to stand up for everything all at once, because then that's when the world feels a little overwhelming, because again, there's so many things moving at the same time right now. So standing up for one thing that you truly can pour passion and love into, versus feeling like you can fix all the world's problems at once, you know, that was also something I've had to realize and like check myself on.
It goes back to your point about everything being interconnected too, though. If you stand up for one thing, the likelihood is you're standing up for a lot when you do that.
Yeah, no, that's really powerful too. What is something, you know, on a West Hollywood level, more of a local level, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with West Hollywood, and how are ways that we can also work together on a local level to find solutions for one another and our community?
Yeah, West Hollywood's challenges are similar challenges that a lot of cities across this country are frankly facing. It's, you know, how do we continue to grow and meet our housing needs? How do we be a city that creates affordability for people who need it, which is part of what it means to be a welcoming, inclusive city for all people, is that we have housing for people to live in that's affordable. We can create the conditions for all people from all different socioeconomic backgrounds to live there. Something we've been dedicated to doing as a city from the very beginning. You know, we were founded as a rent control city 40 years ago, a city that born from community organizing, saying, you know, we need a government more responsive to the needs, especially of queer people, but of displaced people from everywhere. You know, Russian Jews were a big part of the early coalition that helped found the city of West Hollywood. And in addition to the LGBTQ activists that were, you know, escaping the homophobia of LAPD, the big black cat struggle, right? That was part of the story that led to West Hollywood. And so all of this sort of coming together is something we're still facing today. How do we be a welcoming, inclusive city as this next generation of struggle is really upon us? Some of the specific issues, you know, we have to build a lot of housing, and how we do that is going to be a real question. We're only 1.89 square miles, pretty tiny.
Yeah, we're locked in.
Locked in and a safe haven. So people want to, you know, not just come to the city because they're finding their queer identity and wanting to live that life, but they're wanting to raise families in the city differently than they thought about 40 years ago. And that means different types of housing. We know we need 3-4 bedroom apartments now, maybe differently than we used to just need a bunch of single studios. So those challenges are real. How we continue to be a part of a region that has a homelessness crisis that we're facing, which is really driven by economics in so many ways, but mental health and so many different other substance use issues that are combined and making it more complicated. So it's all of these things happening at once. And the city is, again, in its 40 years of growth and cityhood. So we have to look forward to what the next 40 years of our city will be like, how we're going to continue to lead on these issues, especially in this very difficult time where cities are not getting the resources or support they need from the federal government. But we want to build a train, and how are we going to get this done here? A lot of big questions for the long haul.
It's exciting, though, because these are all, like, it starts with the questions, and it starts with, like, hearing people out and hearing, I want to have a family, but where am I supposed to, you know, where am I supposed to put them, my family, and make them create a safe space? And I was actually just making the joke the other day that, you know, you see more dog shops and dog clothing stores in West Hollywood or even Los Angeles than kids stores, because sometimes it's the more affordable option at this point. And you know, it's not necessarily the route that everybody wants to go, but as you said, socioeconomic background, like sometimes that's the only option for people to have like a level of building a family right now. But it's very real that, you know, we're having these upcomings, and it's not even just in West Hollywood. It's not even just Los Angeles. It's like across the board. I mean, I even just saw an article recently about Amsterdam and how they're also doing a housing crisis right now. So I do think that, you know, having the, you know, asking the questions and then also figuring out how we can build together as a community and still realize that there's work to do. And then also, of course, all the fights that are happening on the federal level. It's just a whole other level. But, you know, that's another podcast episode.
That's right.
And it's just exciting, though, that we are seeing people that are younger and getting involved. Because, again, you know, I'm 33, and I never thought that I would be this involved in politics before. And when I tell people that, they're like, oh, like, you automatically assume that politics is reserved for a, quote unquote, it's been like pitched as superiority or even like a higher an older generation, it's you know, seen as that, but we are seeing a younger generation get involved, and we are seeing, you know, huge political shifts when it comes to like the mayoral race in New York City with Zohran Mamdani, and we're just seeing like this really big energy coming together, which I'm really excited about. What is something that you're excited about when it comes to the future of politics, especially with the younger generations?
Yeah, I think having that set of lived experiences be represented in government is very different. We're not just getting together and forming organizations to champion our issues and go make sure we have candidates and elected officials who support us, we are becoming those elected officials that understand the issues from our own lived experience, and we're making a difference on them. I think it's part of why, housing hasn't been an issue that's been mainstream in the political space. It's an issue that is certainly mainstream, but there's not a unanimous decision, especially within any party, about how to handle this crisis. And that tells you that there's missing leadership that has been affected by that issue from the core. And as somebody who, lost my family's home in the mortgage collapse in 2008, my family are now renters. I've helped pay for their rent during my first few months of being mayor this year. This is a real crisis, and it's all across the country. And we have a lot of elected officials who will say all the right things and will support all the, economic justice sort of things they can, but won't get the job done when it comes to housing, because this is a real generational fight. There's a real entrenched outlook that says some neighborhoods need to be protected and other people will have to figure it out. But that's effectively a ban on renters' ability to live in certain parts of communities. And that we can start seeing it that way and voicing it that way. We also know that these are intersecting with climate issues. This is sort of a non-negotiable outlook for so many people in a generation that's sick and tired of seeing elected officials make trade-offs. And now is saying, well, you're the one that will trade off now instead. And I think that's something I'm really excited about, because we've needed a non-negotiable outlook on some of those defining cost of living issues in politics. It's what I think has really created this divide over how do we solve some of these big problems, this fight that we're so immensely in. Everybody is suffering from the lack of economic mobility. Everyone that is at rural, city, it is families, there's so many things that are tied into it, and that we have leadership that is ready to take the mantle and get the job done. In cities and state legislatures and Congress, it's truly exciting. We just need more of it.
It's super exciting. And I'm seeing more and more of it where like the younger generations who are also tapping into younger forms of communication, whether that's through social media. We are seeing this shift also with media when it comes to legacy media is not really being seen from the younger generations. It's all through TikTok and social media, which is now bringing up the opportunity for creators to voice their opinions, and which creates political platforms with individual creators, which then people are looking up to individual creators for their outlooks and opinions, which is really fascinating to me, because it's actually putting the hands, it's like going back to an even more community level, because as you mentioned before, certain leaders would have opinions, but then wouldn't actually act on it. And it's almost sometimes with legacy media, there's a bias to it, right? And we've seen that across the board. So I do think that that's just part of it. And I feel like, now we're seeing that shift also with social media. While there is the information or the disinformation, the misinformation, that's something that we're definitely going to have to tackle long term. It is very, very exciting, and it feels more tangible. It feels more approachable. And I think that is something that people have long been hungry for. They just didn't know how to get involved in politics. But now we're going to create our own platforms and do it.
It's this trusted messenger idea. Paul Revere running through communities, the British are coming, right? Like we trusted that voice running through our communities. And we've needed more voices that give us a sign of what direction to go, of what's coming, of how to think about it in our own terms. It's sort of like meeting people where they're at. And that social media has been unleashed in this way that I think we knew was possible when it started coming online, but it wasn't happening just yet. People are self-motivated now to put themselves out there, to risk, I think, some of the consequences that can come with being so active in your voice too, that we have so many more people who are a part of that realm of risk-taking and that creating trusted messengers and pathways for transformation for our communities. It's exactly what we need to do. It's like this Gestalt idea I talk about a lot. We're greater than the sum of our parts, that people are able to activate and move people in ways. Like I don't watch legacy media or, the regular news and TV. And I'm so sort of confused when people talk about it as an entity, because it's not my lived experience anymore. I'm not sitting down. When I go home to my parents, they're watching it and I'll get clued in from them. But I just don't have that lifestyle. So we're all getting news and information so many different ways now. And we have to accept that and now watch as it moves us in a direction that is hopefully more conducive to the outlook of our communities. I think that's where the concern comes in. It's like these aren't all trusted messengers. Some of these folks are not, journalistic in their outlook or the way they're approaching the work. They're just sharing their opinions. And so we still have the responsibility as people to be informed and to have that ability to be media literate and really understand what we're taking in, be critical of what's happening, and not just, move with the masses.
I fully agree. And I think it's going to be a new challenge as social media starts to become more and more prevalent, because I don't think it's going away by any means. And even if certain platforms shift or go away, there'll be other ways that communication is like continued, And that's also something that I would love to talk to you about, because before we started rolling, we were talking about, branding, and when it comes to especially the LGBTQ plus community, and how there was at one point in time where Pride felt very corporate backed, right? But now we're seeing almost the flip side of that coin, where corporations are removing a lot of their funding. And now prides are almost they're being defunded, in the sense where we're like, well, how do we hold a pride anymore? What do you think about this political shift when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community, and how are ways that we can better support each other in our own community if the corporate funding is no longer there?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is recognizing that Pride was a protest, right, to start, that we have the opportunity to get back to our roots, that those corporate pullouts are an opportunity for us to go back to our basics and protest and use Pride as that vehicle. Like, how dare you betray us and betray your commitment to this community? Because it is a betrayal when they pull out. They've been there at the table when it was politically convenient to do so, and they're no longer at the table because it's politically convenient to do so. That's betrayal, and we need to call it what it is. We need to be deeply questioning what it looks like for people to come back to a table when we've created that politically convenient reality in the future, as I know we're working to do. But right now, I think really that we can champion people and these corporations or business partners, whatever it may be, for their investment. It's sort of a different and, uncomfortable thing. I think there's been that feeling of like, well, Pride is becoming too corporate. What are we really doing? But ultimately, it's investment in our community's interest. It's investment in our visibility and our ability to raise our issues. And that investment, we're seeing right now how important it truly is. And so we can't take it for granted. And we have to work to build out these partnerships in bigger ways, I think, as we move forward. It is ultimately how we channel our work. It is how we get the job done. It isn't how we find ourselves in our being. It's not, but it does unlock a different capacity for our community, and we need that investment long term. So we have a lot of work to do to figure this out in a big way moving forward.
Well, I think that the reason why I wanted to ask that specifically is because it goes hand in hand on a personal level as it does on a corporate level. Because in a lot of ways, people are like, I'm too scared to speak out and share my political beliefs because I'm afraid that I will no longer receive funding. I will lose my job. I will lose my family. I will lose everything if I speak up on this very important opinion. And we're also seeing brands saying the very similar things, where it's like, I'm afraid that I will lose my company and I will lose, backing from consumers if I speak out on this very public opinion, right? And so it's very hand in hand, which is very interesting, that it's like the more that we all support each other in the movement that we're hoping to see, they can't remove everyone's career if everyone's talking about it, right? So the more we all speak up, the more we will all be able to link arms and be like, well, we're going to stand firm in this decision. And then it feels less scary because more and more people will start speaking up. And the same thing with companies. I feel like we'll see more and more of them actually, we'll see more of them stand up for themselves if they don't see the backlash that comes from the community. I mean, it's vice versa. So it's like kind of seeing that they do go hand in hand, which is fascinating in itself. I don't know.
Yeah, I think when you talk about the scariness, the vulnerability of exposure, of trying to be out there, like, I think in very real ways about social movement history, the sort of fire squad lines of people, when people are being hosed in the civil rights movement, you see these images that are, even the lunch counter sit-ins, right? The people sitting there, that level of exposure meant they were literally physically harmed. And so we're not talking about something we haven't seen history do already. It's very real threats to our physical ability, to our, financial strength and well-being. All of that is very real. And so I do not deny that question that people are placing themselves in. But we also know that struggle through history is what has advanced our rights. And so when you're sacrificing your place in that line, it means somebody else has to stand up, somebody who may be more vulnerable to that exposure and to that harm that will come from them. And we frankly don't have a choice. The question is, what role are we playing in this? Are you going to be someone standing at the line? Are you someone who's willing to go sit at the lunch counter, sit in this moment? Or are you going to be the next in line? Are you going to be someone taking the photos of it while it happens? It's all important roles, but we have to find our role right now. And we know there's a lot of scary options out there, and we have to hope it and and work so it doesn't get that bad.
I fully agree. And, you mentioned earlier also about, your parents lost their house in the housing crisis. So that is also coming from a very vulnerable life-altering challenge that your family directly was affected by. What was something that maybe a piece of a baggage moment or a life obstacle or a challenge that you've personally experienced that has also funneled your advocacy too, because it's also a way that people can realize that they can use their own life challenges to funnel their advocacy?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I think about just sort of that feeling of like how different I realized I was from the experiences a lot of my peers, the peers who may be part of the like, we're not going to talk about all these sort of issues because they didn't impact them, frankly. Why would they? For me, I was so angry. I was angry in a way that was like harmful to my own spirit and my soul. It was harmful to those around me who got into the crosshairs of difference. I was just really angry, and I still have that anger in me, but I've really been able to communicate it through an act of love and through an act of what I care about and how hard I'm working to protect the things I care about and to create more safety and support for people out there because of the things that make me angry. And so transferring that anger into something that was more tangible and more powerful, I think of a motivating factor. That's the baggage I carry, is just the anger I felt from feeling so misunderstood, so left out, not just of like my peer group and my sort of understanding of my peers around me, but like from the care of government itself. When I realized that this entity was supposed to be taking care of us as people and to be in the place we're in now, something I felt so early on in my life and have just seen get worse, frankly, throughout my timeline. There were moments of hope, sure. And I think that's what really kept me on the line, like seeing Obama's victory and having been a part of that, feeling like local victories. All of this makes me believe that we can do something good here. But knowing that we're capable of such harm, it's an anger that is my baggage, personally.
Well, I think that is such an incredibly important level of self-reflection, because I think that's what we're all collectively feeling right now, is a level of anger at this betrayal that we're feeling. And it's just like, yes, anger somewhat creates, disruption, and there are things that can come from it. But it's like, I truly think the way to really make a difference is through love. As you said, like finding ways to talk to one another through love and being like, the reason why I care so deeply about this is because I love my people so much. I love people being able to love others. I love people being able to feed their kids. I love people being able to go to the doctor when they feel unhealthy and not feel like they have to go into bankruptcy because of it. That's love for me, where I feel like everyone deserves this level of like this human experience. So it's one life that we do have. Like, why are we giving them so many setbacks? Like, I don't understand. So it's like, I do think so many people are experiencing their own personal level of anger right now. So it's like, how can we transfer that into love?
That's right.
And so I would love to ask you too, if somebody is listening in and they are really eager to get started on a local level, even if that is nationally or if that is in West Hollywood, what would be some tangible baby steps or first steps that they can do to get involved?
Yeah. You asked me for baby steps. I wasn't the baby step person. I was the splash into action
like
sort of person and figure out backwards. And so, for anybody, just get started is the best piece of advice. We talked about finding community and how important that is, to know what you care about and how you want to communicate it. That's so important. But just getting started, I think people always try to find like the perfect moment to show up. When is that event? And I think when you start to just show up, you have no idea what you're going to be exposed to. That first person who's going to catch your eye, that's going to become a point of connection, a relationship that's going to change your life down the road. But you have to show up. And I think there are so many reasons why people don't want to leave their protective, safe bubble right now, that peace zone that we find ourselves in. And that's fair. But that push-pull of like wanting to see things change but being unwilling to change yourself, we got to break that. We got to start being a little different ourselves in order to make things be different.
Absolutely. And what if somebody was like, I'm really excited, but I don't even know where to get started? Like maybe if it's, you always hear about like creating pros and cons list or writing something down, or like for me, I'm a writer. I need to see like a visual or something. Like what would be something that could be like an actionable first step of even just like writing something down that they care about? Maybe like something where they can visualize, maybe this is something that I didn't realize I cared so deeply about. And then that is where they can like set their focuses on. Because I think from a personal level, there's so many things that I care about. It's like, where do I begin? Is there something that you do even on a personal level that you're like, this is a great way for me to get started?
Yeah, totally. I think the thinking about what you do care about, where you would want to put your time, the issues that you want to see differences being made. Maybe you're, not housing impacted, but you're somebody who wants to see more bicycling happening across LA. It's like crazy to you that there aren't more bike lanes everywhere. Find the organization that's making change happen on that issue, which would be Streets for All or Move LA. There's some great ones out there. Maybe you're somebody who cares so deeply about the LGBTQ community, and there are a lot of organizations doing that, but you have that, later in coming out life story that we talked about, and Baby Gay is the right organization for you. I really, especially in LA, there is an organization for every issue. There is a group of people for every cause, and finding that group of people helps make your life a lot easier. There's social events. There's going to be, the calls to action. They'll give you the toolkits of how to make change happen. You want to get plugged into those groups.
I fully agree, because I feel like that's something as I started stepping more into LGBTQ travel advocacy on a global scale, I'm talking about even in places where it's still to this day criminalized to identify as LGBTQ, and there's still give or take around 70 countries where it's still criminalized to identify as LGBTQ. Even in those places, there are organizations that are doing the groundwork, that have boots on the ground, that are actually actively trying to make a difference. So there is an organization for everything that you care about. I know it might feel like, oh, this doesn't feel like there's something that I can actually grasp onto, but I'm like, no, if you are passionate about public transportation or anything, there will be an organization for that. So I think definitely even my sister who wanted to get involved more in politics, and she lives in Franklin, Tennessee, even a smaller town in Tennessee, I connected her with 4 or 5 different organizations of things that she cared about. And she was able to now take her steps. And I fully agree that being able to research the area that you're in and finding 1 or 2 organizations to reach out to, and they need the help. They want the help. It's open-armed, right? And so I think that's a really wonderful step in finding ways to get started, especially as we're moving into this season and this next era of humanity. Because it's not just America that this is happening to. We're starting to see this happen everywhere.
That's right.
No, I really appreciate you coming in and sharing all of this too. And I kind of, as one of our final questions too, I wanted to ask you, what does the word resilience mean to you?
I've been thinking about resilience so much. I've really stopped talking about resistance, actually, and I've been talking about resilience a lot more. I think in the first Trump administration, resistance was the big thing. I know I have a jean jacket that has resist on the back of it. But resist to me is stop. It's sink in. It's block. And right now, we're definitely in a moment of protecting democracy and having to do all that. But I think, we have a democracy. We are here as people. Resilience is the job. We cannot be erased. We cannot be shut out. We have to stay here and continue to grow and thrive beyond this moment. And so it's a different energetic sort of way of thinking about the moment we're in. To me, it has everything to do with sustainability and longevity, of resourcing yourself, of really finding that way that you can be impactful. Resilience is not an act of saying no. To me, it's actually is saying a bigger yes. This is what I'm actually fighting for. We've said no for so long to this, and I think it's part of what's alienated people, actually. Saying no when to others this has been the solution, or this at least sounded like something, it's confusing. And resilience to me is knowing that there is a future that we're defining on ourselves, that we are able to move there, and it's about how we get there. It's that huge, big yes.
I love it, because again, it's I talk a lot about on the show word association. And how even just reframing word association in your mind, for example, saying resist is almost like you're just constantly fighting, or you're fighting, or holding on to the fight that you've already done. Resilience is almost no, even if I get knocked down, I'm going to stand up again, eventually to the point where you become tired, not me, because I will always be resilient in what it is that I stand up for. And I feel like there's almost even a release in the word itself versus, resist. And that's also something that I want to ask you about is the difference between fighting and healing, right? Because I almost feel like these are 2 different word associations there. Resisting is parallel to fighting, fighting to hold on to what you've already achieved. Resilience is almost you are still moving towards progress, but maintaining a level of healing in the process. What does that look like differently to you between fighting and knowing when you're healing? And why is it important to maintain a level of healing throughout this?
Such great questions. I really appreciate this conversation.
Of course,
I think the fight is, to me, it feels so this is the only moment we have, and we're going to struggle and duke it out until we're done. I think resilience, there's something that's like, I'm not going away. I'm actually going to be here for the long haul. I have so many more moments that matter coming up, and I have to really think about all of that. So I think thinking about the fight, I'm so not there. I think I've engaged in everything like it's a fight. But when I think about healing, I recognize that so many people are coming from a place of harm in some way, that we are confused and affected in ways that we may have not been. And in order to really understand how we can become different, it is a much slower conversation. It is not an ambush. It is not a fight.
I agree.
It is really an act of bringing in and coming to a table of creating a calming environment and understanding what we're really trying to achieve and get there. And I think when I was in the fight mindset, I felt, like that was what I could give. It was the energy I had. It was how hard I was willing to go for the things I cared about. It felt like I was giving it my all. And now that I am, almost 20 years into this sort of work for myself, I feel a deeper sense of resourcefulness within myself. I have such a deeper well to draw from.
Yeah.
And so I know that one moment isn't all I have to give. And in fact, I have many moments where I can continue to move the needle on the issues I care about.
Yeah.
And it's up to me to stay with that. And that is an act of healing myself. Of no longer fighting myself or fighting for myself, but an act of creating a space where I can be and become, and others can too.
I love that. I love that so much on a deep level, because in a way, we look at the history of the country, and I know we touched base on the 40 years of history and just West Hollywood, but like the deep history of our country. In many ways, there's a lot of demographics and a lot of marginalized groups that have never been given the opportunity to heal. And I do think that maybe part of this journey right now that I'm trying to hold on to a level of optimism is, even if it's a toxic positivity, is the fact that maybe because everything is falling apart, what it feels like, maybe this is going to be the absolute first chance that marginalized groups are able to heal. Because then all the younger generations that are coming in and being like, no, this needs to be a real conversation, and we're tired of fighting. We want to just live and without being erased, right? So I do think that right now we're seeing this change where it's like, maybe there is a chance that we can heal in the process of us staying resilient. And by doing that is having conversations and being like, how are you affected through your lived experience? And how can I be more empathetic to that? Even if I don't necessarily understand that lived experience, how can I be more empathetic to that in general? What's one of the wrap-up questions too, I want to ask you, if, there's a lot of LGBTQ people listening in right now, and I know a lot of people, especially within the trans community and non-binary community, the bisexual community, a lot of our community is feeling a little sense of like bracing themselves. What are ways that you believe that we can stick together and become stronger as a community?
Yeah, I think in recognizing how much we still have to face in just this, administration's timeline alone, say it is just the 4 years that we think it may be at this point, it's very concerning. I think the level of, craziness that's going to be thrown at us and coming our way. I think it is essential that people care for themselves and others in whatever way that they need to. We cannot relinquish our joy, which feels insane. I know when I ask people how you're doing, and people immediately sort of clench up, and there's a feeling like you're not allowed to say you're doing okay, even if it is the truth. And we have to reject that outright. We have to be okay. We have to find a way to be okay, even with this hellstorm coming in around us. Right. It's essential. Otherwise, they're winning on the very basis of it. They may have not taken away our home or, any sort of real sense of, but they're taking away, every sense. And that sanity that we have to collectively continue to build. I like that you said, this toxic positivity, but I think it's okay just to be positive and have a positive, hopeful, optimistic outlook. Somebody recently called me like lovely Lou about something, and like kind of being delusional about the outlook. And I don't think I can forecast destruction or like that this is over and then also show up every day and give my best self to it. We have to be hopeful at the end of it. And so I think what it takes for people to find that place of hopefulness and optimism, part of it's like really being able to, mood board your way into the world we want to see. And I think we have to do a little bit more of that. We've gotten so into the place of defense and of fighting and protecting, that we aren't really able to articulate or define what it is we actually care about and want to protect. And so, mood boards at the end of the year for our 2028 election, like we got to get there.
Absolutely.
And I mean it. It's like being able to feel fun and free and defining a future, even though it feels like the walls are closing in on us. We can't give up our own freedom now.
The biggest threat that they have against us is our joy. Yeah, I mean, because it is that is the one thing that is impossible to strip away from us.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the history of the LGBTQ plus community has always shown up with joy. First and foremost, they're like, we're breaking down every social norm and going against every single thing that life has told us to do, and we're still going to show up and we're going to have a smile on our face when we do it. And I do think that is like the biggest thing that you can do right now is don't let them take that away. Because like at the end of the day, like we might not have anything else, but like that is the one thing that's going to keep us truly to ourselves. I also feel like my level of like positivity that I keep telling myself is like comparing to a couple of decades ago, like because of social media and seeing the trajectory of how progress is with politics, we have never had more allies than we have now. Like we look at history and how even just a couple of decades ago we had the AIDS epidemic, right? And where the government turned its back on our community. And even, the heterosexual counterparts didn't know how to help us, right? But now we have so many more allies than we did before. We're seeing so many allies across the board. And the more allies we have, the more power we have, because once we all come together, like there's nothing they can do to collectively take away our joy.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the city of West Hollywood, when, the Reagan administration was denying people access to HIV and AIDS healthcare, the city of West Hollywood was born. We were a city that invested deeply into social services. That infrastructure exists now in this timeline when the Trump administration is taking away resources. And while we're small, we are a model for others to do the same. And that we get to be a government that is differently responsive than they ever were tells me the story of these trying times are actually what helps us create a better future in the long haul. We get to be more exposed to what's needed. We can create it, and we can make sure it happens and is sustained. And so it's definitely dark, but I, like you, feel very hopeful actually in recognizing the scope and course of history we come from. I think differently than I did 12, 15 years ago because I know more now. And I think that's the responsibility of all people who are feeling that sort of sense of darkness is look to history, look to the hopefulness, and get to work. That's the part we can't skip. We have to get to work.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You're just such you're really inspiring to me. And it's like, should I run for office? No, I'm joking. Yes. I'm just like, no, honestly, it's just really relieving to hear you and to be in your presence because it's like very inspiring in every way. At the end of every episode, I ask one or two funny questions just because we get deep and it's like, let's end on some joy, Okay, if your life was a theme park ride, what kind of ride would it be and why?
Oh my gosh. The swings came to mind right away. Like I've been sort of amazed at the heights I've been able to go and how quick that happens and stay grounded at the same time, the sort of up and down. And what have you? It's been.
Wait, actually, I love that because I immediately thought of, like the thing that you get on and you spin yourself while it's spinning and
the teacups.
And I was like, wait, that's probably not a good reflection on myself, right? I'm like, maybe I should think of a different theme park ride.
I kind of love it. You're in your own orbit while the rest of it's all happening around you. You know?
You know what? I'm loving this. I'm loving this. Maybe it's not as bad as I was thinking.
Not at all.
Okay, what's a guilty pleasure TV show or a movie that you secretly love?
Oh my gosh. I am like the biggest Love Island fan ever. I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed. It was like a recent, last summer I became addicted. I love it so much. And just all of reality TV show for the most part, I really find indulgence. I'm also a big sports girl. I love a good sports night.
What's your sports team?
I've got a lot of sports teams. Yeah, Philadelphia sports teams. I grew up in Arizona though, so we love my Phoenix Suns.
Okay, I love that. Also, Love Island, I love it. I think it's for me, it's because the line of work we do is so like deeply. You have to be so deeply present that where I'm like, if I'm going to watch Love Island, I'm just loving life. I'm living through other people's drama. I'm like, life is good. I'm a gremlin. This is great. This is actually like, I don't have to think about it. But like when people recommend like a CIA government overthrow movie, I'm like, don't do this to me. I don't want to. I can't do it. Just give me some reality TV show and I can eat my popcorn.
That's right.
Also Titanic. That one's also my favorite. If you had a personal mascot that followed you everywhere, what would it do?
Okay, I thought about this question so much, and I honestly, I don't know. I laugh at the situations I've gotten into myself with like what feels like little to no help. How many times I just show up by myself and they're like, do you have people help? Like I don't have an entourage. I don't have a mascot running around like that, but I love the idea that I could. I should be working on that.
Right, you should. But if like maybe you could do, I'm trying to think of like because you said the Phoenix Suns, you like them, right?
Yeah.
You need a mascot though, like some form of a symbol. We have to think of this. We have to brainstorm it.
I really need to think of this before the re-election.
My high school, exactly. My high school was the Stars, so I dressed up as the mascot to be I was the star. Like,
oh my gosh.
And I was in all yellow.
What I will say is I was like voted best school spirit.
Of course you were.
You know, it totally makes sense. So I'm sort of that mascot that runs around everywhere.
Okay.
I'm the cheerleader for all the things. I've been very committed, even like my Halloween costumes, to be West Hollywood themed. I very much am like here for it.
Okay, you're like, it's me. I'm the mascot.
I'm the mascot. Yeah, I think that's the case.
If you can let everyone know where to follow your journey and if there are ways to get in touch with you or your team to get involved as well.
Please follow me on Instagram at Chelsea Levy. I'm a big Instagram girl. I love it. And get involved with the city of West Hollywood. We truly are one of the best places to get connected. There are so many different opportunities to be in touch with the city itself, but also the bigger community. And that's the place you need to get connected.
Yay. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. You have really inspired me as well. And even just hearing from you and being like, you know what? It's not toxic positivity. We just have to be positive. That's it.
Right.
We're going to get
positive.
through it. Yeah. And that's a wrap on this episode of She Comes with Baggage. If you love this conversation, please make sure to follow She Comes with Baggage on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for more content and behind-the-scenes moments. And if you're tuning in on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other audio platform, don't forget to leave a review. I love hearing from you, and your support helps keep these conversations going. And just remember, if you are carrying any baggage, you're not alone, and we're all more alike than we might realize. See you soon.